but interesting criticism from Labor MPs. Joining me now, Shadow Home Affairs and Cybersecurity Minister James Paterson. Thanks for your time. Look, politics can be a bit dry. Why not include The Simpsons? You're not too happy with Blinky the Three-Eyed Fish and iterations of him making an appearance? Why not?
Tom, of course, there's moments of levity in politics and we wouldn't want to be serious all the time. But when it comes to something as serious as the future of our country and its energy system, when it comes to something as serious and as important to our country as the AUKUS agreement, which is going to be a generational commitment for our country on a bipartisan basis, we should not have educated, intelligent people going out there propagating vicious falsehoods and misinformation like we have seen some Labor MPs do in the last couple of days, particularly egregious stuff from people like Dr Andrew Leigh, in his own estimation, the smartest man in Parliament, someone with a PhD, really propagating just baseless false information about nuclear safety. I mean, it's been called out today by people like Ziggy Switkowski, a nuclear physicist and one of Australia's most respected scientists and businessmen. It's been called out by Dr Addy Patterson, the former head of ANSTO. I mean, they really do not have a leg to stand on, particularly when they are saying it will be safe for our sailors to sleep every night next to a small modular reactor inside a submarine, and they won't be growing any extra eyes.
You can add Simon Holmes a court to that. He said, don't cheapen the debate. He did also point out, when you're talking about what can go wrong with large-scale energy, when nuclear does go wrong, and thankfully modern nuclear power is very safe, but when it does go wrong, it can be very bad. Is that fair enough for Labor MPs to point out?
Well, credit to Simon Holmes a court for not indulging in this dangerous misinformation and calling that out. That's welcome. I mean, when you look on a basis, an international basis, and you measure the number of deaths by energy source, nuclear is at the bottom. It is the safest of technologies that we have in the modern world. But far more people die from traditional sources of energy like coal. And actually, there are people who die in the production of renewable energy as well. And on an international comparative basis, the deaths from nuclear are infinitesimally small. It's one of the safest forms of energy out there. So no one should be engaging in this, particularly if you also believe that we can safely operate a nuclear-propelled submarine. Let's think about what a submarine is. It is effectively a small modular reactor that goes inside a steel tube. It has 120 souls on board. It can go hundreds of metres below the ocean. It can circumnavigate the globe. It can launch a precision-guided missile at a target hundreds of kilometres away. It can return home again, do all of that undetected. And not only are we going to own and operate these in Australia, we're going to build them safely. The Prime Minister says we can do all that, we just couldn't possibly plug a small modular reactor in on the ground to our electricity grid. I mean, what we are proposing to do with the civil nuclear industry is frankly far more simple than what is the most complex industrial machine on the planet in a nuclear-propelled submarine, which the Prime Minister says Australia can do.
It sounds as though there could be cheaper power bills for those people living nearby. Does that sound like a bribe, recognition that people are reluctant to embrace nuclear power? Because when people spoke about money for vaccines, people said, no, that sort of implies they're dangerous. Does that imply the same thing here?
That's not what we said, Tom. No, that's not what we've said. We've said that there'll be industrial zones around these nuclear facilities that will have discounted power because they won't require transmission costs. And transmission costs is anywhere from a third to 40% of someone's bill. If you're located next to a nuclear power facility, there isn't that transmission cost. You can get it straight from the plant, and so it can be discounted. And the exciting thing about that for these regional communities
is that just the same as anyone living near the coal-fired power plant at the moment, though? Does that happen now?
I'm not sure, Tom. Not that I'm aware of, but it is something that we're proposing should happen with these nuclear power facilities, and it could be used to support industries that are very energy intensive and need that reliable baseload 24/7 energy that really only a traditional source of energy or nuclear can provide. So that's things like smelting in terms of traditional industries, but also future industries, things like data centres, and particularly if you want to have data centres that are involved in processing artificial intelligence. I mean, that's one of those demanding computational things that you can ask a computer system to do, and it's incredibly energy intensive, but it is the future. And so we're going to need, frankly, an abundance of energy. We're going to need more energy, and we're going to need it to be reliable and affordable and stable.
Okay.
Right now, people who are building data centres in Australia are having to build diesel generators alongside them. That's hardly environmentally friendly, nor is it particularly economic, but that's the reality because they need that stable supply of energy that can't otherwise be guaranteed.
But if you've got these coal-fired power plants right now where people are not getting cheaper power, basically what they'd be doing is averaging out costs of that network. So what the coalition would say is, no, the people nearby get a big discount, Does that mean others subsidise them effectively?
No, Tom, there's no extra cost here. The saving comes from the lack of a need for transmission. So if you're co-located next to or on
but that's now, I'm saying that's the same situation now.
Facility,
there's no change.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that we do that in Australia. Maybe someone can correct me. I'd be happy to correct it if we do. I'm not sure we do that. What we're proposing, though, is it would become part of the feature of this system.
Okay.
That as we build these new reactors in regional communities, that we allow people to co-locate right next door and get advantage of that direct plug-in to the system. And it is
for the
not
industrial,
come at any greater cost to anyone else because it's the absence.
I'm just talking about, No, I understand the industrial. I'm talking about everyday customers. Anyway, look, I wanted to ask you one more final one about this. It's clearly a big policy, and indeed Peter Dutton wasn't shying away from it being one, saying he's happy for the next election to be a referendum on this. Does that mean if you don't win, given what happens usually in a losing referendum, that you scrap the policy from that point on, the voters will have rejected it?
I think there's a huge contrast being offered to the Australian people right now. Frankly, we have a timid Prime Minister with no agenda or vision for the future, and Peter Dutton, who is willing to treat the Australian public as adults, take a serious proposal to them that is a vision for our country that I think should and will be embraced. I mean, this is about the industries of the future and the jobs of the future and the stable power grid. I mean, I was listening to Simon Holmes before admitting that you do have to have a stable form of energy. Well, there are three options for that in addition, because we know that renewables can't do that on an intermittent basis. You can either have gas, which has to have a carbon capture and storage. That doesn't operate yet commercially. I hope it does, but not yet. You can have green hydrogen. That's not yet operating commercially. Or you can have reliable, proven, safe nuclear technology. We're the only party that is putting forward a credible plan for net zero by 2050.
So if it's so compelling, that's the question, though. Do you walk away with it if it's rejected by voters?
Tom, you won't be surprised. I'm not going to take up your invitation to speculate on the outcome of the next election, which might be 11 months away, and the aftermath.
Well, it's a referendum.
But we fundamentally believe in this policy. We believe in this policy. We think it's right for Australia. That's why we're
proposing it. So you're sticking with it?
The Australian people embrace that.
So, I mean, given it's a long-term
Tom,
play,
as I said, I'm not going to take up that invitation. Your points for effort, but I'm just not going to take up the invitation to speculate about what happens in 2026. We're committed to this policy. It's a great policy.
James Paterson, talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
The future.